Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the advanced settings for setting up your wheel in Forza 7. Now I know a lot of you have been asking for this video, so hopefully you find it very useful and we'll be able to get a really good experience out of the Forza 7 wheel setup. So we'll jump straight into it. If we go to our options, controller, advanced settings. We won't really get into the dead zones because they're pretty self-explanatory. Basically, your inside dead zone is the start of your input, outside dead zone is the last part of your input at maximum input. So you can tune these to what you want. Normally everyone will recommend you use 0 and 100 on your steering axis, and your pedals will be pretty similar unless you have some issues with some slight spiking on either end of your input. You can get rid of those unwanted spikes by adjusting your dead zones appropriately. So if we move on, we'll start with the vibration scale. This sets the vibration intensity, so it's basically the volume setting for the vibration feedback. Force feedback scale is basically the volume setting for the aligning torque. This is not a master gain setting for the total force feedback. This only controls the aligning torque and dynamic forces, which come from the center spring scale, which we'll talk about in a minute. So next we have steering sensitivity. Basically this was designed to be a degrees of rotation setting, but for some reason it's not working as it's supposed to. It was supposed to limit the degrees of rotation with a soft lock, but like I said, for some reason it's not working as intended at the moment. Steering linearity is the linearity curve of your wheel. If you raise this, you'll have a more sensitive input around the center and less sensitive at full lock. If you lower it, obviously it will reverse it, so you have low sensitivity around the center and high sensitivity at full lock. Force feedback understeer is the the aligning torque from mechanical trail. If we jump onto a quick diagram here, I can show you what the mechanical trail is. Basically, the caster angle of the front wheel produces a mechanical trail where the contact patch of the tyre trails behind the steering axis, which gives, whenever there's load applied to this contact patch of the tyre, it'll have a tendency to try and straighten itself up, and this is basically what's known as aligning torque. And if you're wondering where I've gotten all of this information from, there's a big thread on the Forza forums which I'll leave a link to in the description so you can have a look. But moving on to our next setting, so we just covered force feedback understeer, and basically the values, default value should be raw mechanical trail coming from the physics, and if you want more mechanical trail or aligning force or self-aligning torque, you want to lower this setting, because raising it will reduce its effects, which is hence the name force feedback understeer. The higher you have this setting, the higher the feel you'll have when you start understeering. The lower the setting, the wheel should lose less force when the front tyres push past their maximum grip. Force feedback minimum force is the aligning torque from pneumatic trail, and if we have a look back at our picture, pneumatic trail is the result of the deformation of the tyre. As it rotates faster and faster, the contact patch of the tyre actually twists and rotates, so it trails behind the center line of the wheel, which gives extra trail and increases the self-aligning torque. And basically this setting will allow you to feel when the tyre has its maximum grip and when you've pushed it past its grip, and you'll be able to tune this by using both settings, but this setting at the moment seems to be trying to be conveyed as a minimum force. So if you lower this setting, you will have a higher centering force in your initial turn-in. If you raise it, you'll have a little bit less force. So you can play with that as you like. I've left it at the default value and just tuned force feedback understeered, so I can sort of get, well, to basically put it, this force feedback understeer setting is your balance between understeer feedback or oversteer feedback. I personally prefer oversteer feedback because it feels more realistic to me, and that seems to be the way a lot of other games handle their force feedback, like Assetto Corsa, iRacing, and all those other big AAA sort of sim racing titles. And moving on, we have the damper scale, which is pretty basic. If you don't know what a damper is, it adds artificial weight to the wheel to make it heavier to turn. And the center spring scale is sort of a dynamic center spring that's calculated from the suspension geometry of the car, mostly the KPI, which is kingpin inclination angle. So what that does, if you have no idea what it means, it's the angle of the steering axis. So when the front wheels are turned, it actually lifts the car on its suspension, so the gravity has a sort of effect to try and bring the wheels back to its center point. Now this force is overcome at racing speed, so really you're only going to notice this when you're driving really slow or you're at a standstill, because this force is overcome by the self-aligned torque from the mechanical and pneumatic trail when you're driving. And that's pretty much all the settings covered there. Hopefully it makes more sense than what the in-game descriptions do. So go out, have a bit of a tune and play around with some settings and see what you can get out of it. Because basically my first view of the Forza 7 demo, when I first got my hands on it, I was pretty gutted by the experience I had because I was completely using the wrong settings. And after talking with the developer in the forum, I managed to get some much better settings that made the driving experience a lot better. Is it perfect like Assetto Corsa? No, but it is a lot more enjoyable than any other Forza game. And there are a few issues with the force feedback at the moment, which they are aware of, and they are planning to fix it. One of the most highest priority ones is an issue that I have with my wheel, which is the CSR Elite. Basically, when it's set up in a custom mapping, for some reason the force feedback isn't conveyed to the wheel like it should. It's losing some of the information, and when I change any setting in the advanced options, it automatically reverts the CSR profile to a custom profile. So I currently have no way of properly feeling what the force feedback has to offer because of this bug, and so I'm really looking forward to getting to try it out for real once they update it. But yeah, that's going to wrap up the video for now. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description for the thread on the Forza forums. It's a really good read if you want to have a go through there. It is very long, so Dust to Death as oh pardon me, Dust to Death, the original poster, has done a great job of putting a summary together in the original post that you can have a read through, which is really handy. And there's also some really good tips in a couple of the other threads there on how to set up your force feedback. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.